Ancient Greece. You've probably pictured white marble statues, profound philosophers debating in the agora, and the birth of democracy. But strip away the polished myths and the Hollywood gloss, and you find a civilization pulsing with a much darker, rawer energy. In the shadows of the Parthenon and the barracks of Sparta, the rules of intimacy were vastly different from anything we recognize today. We are talking about a world where desire was a weapon, marriage was a bizarre ritual of disguise, and an entire army was built on the power of lovers fighting side by side. Forget the sanitized history books, we are about to peel back the toga and reveal the scandalous, often shocking truth about sex in the ancient world. If you walked the streets of Athens, you wouldn't just see men courting women. In fact, that might be the rarest sight of all. The cornerstone of upper-class Greek society was pederasty, a socially acknowledged, complex relationship between an older man, the erasts, and a younger male teen, the eromenos. This wasn't a hidden underground scene, it was built into the educational system. The older man was expected to mentor the boy in politics, war, and virtue. But let's be clear, this mentorship came with physical expectations. However, it wasn't a free-for-all. There were strict, almost bizarre social codes. The boy was supposed to be hard to get and arguably feel no pleasure himself, merely submitting to his mentor out of respect. Once the boy began to grow a beard, he was considered a man, and the sexual aspect of the relationship had to end immediately. To continue past puberty was seen as shameful and effeminate. Sparta was the most militaristic society in history, and their obsession with war bled into the bedroom in a way that sounds like a psychological thriller. Spartan men lived in barracks with other men until they were 30, meaning their entire emotional and sexual world was exclusively male for decades. So, when it came time to marry a woman for procreation, the transition was jarring. To ease the groom into heterosexuality, Spartans had a specific ritual. On the wedding night, the bride would have her head shaved to the scalp and be dressed in a man's cloak and sandals. She was left alone in a dark room. The groom would sneak out of his barracks, visit her in the dark for a quick, strictly functional encounter, and then sprint back to sleep with his army buddies. This cross-dressing ritual suggests that for a Spartan warrior, the only way to perform sexually with a woman was to pretend, at least for a moment, that she was one of the guys. While Sparta had its rituals, the city-state of Thebes took the concept of brothers in arms to its literal, erotic extreme. They created the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite military unit composed of exactly 150 pairs of male lovers. The logic was simple but powerful: a soldier might abandon his post to save his own skin, but he would never abandon his lover. They believed this bond made the unit invincible. And for decades, they were right. This regiment crushed the Spartans at the Battle of Leuctra and remained undefeated until they were finally wiped out by Alexander the Great's father. When the victor walked the field of dead bodies and saw these 150 couples lying dead, still holding on to each other, he reportedly wept, cursing anyone who thought their love was shameful. In ancient Greece, respectable women were essentially under house arrest. They couldn't own property, couldn't vote, and rarely left the women's quarters. But there was a loophole: the hetaira. These were high-class courtesans, and they were the freest women in Athens. Unlike wives, hetaira were educated in philosophy, art, and politics. They were the only women allowed to attend the symposia, the elite drinking parties for men. The most famous of them, Aspasia, was the partner of Pericles, the leader of Athens. She was so brilliant that Socrates himself reportedly visited her to learn the art of rhetoric. While wives were raising children in silence, these companions were influencing the decisions of state, proving that in a patriarchy, sexual allure combined with intellect was the only path to female power. While the hetaira lived in luxury, the reality for most sex workers was far grimmer. The Greeks had a completely different class of prostitute called the pornai, the root of our modern word pornography. The pornai were mostly slaves, bought and sold like cattle. The great lawmaker Solon actually established state-funded brothels filled with these women to protect respectable marriage. The idea was that if men had a cheap, legal outlet for their lust, they wouldn't bother seducing other men's wives. The cost of entry to these brothels was incredibly low, often just one obol, the price of a loaf of bread. It turned the female body into a standardized, government-regulated commodity, stripping away any illusion of romance. We've talked about what was legal, but what about what was forbidden? Adultery, or moichia, was a serious crime, but the definition was heavily skewed. A married man could sleep with prostitutes or slaves without consequence. But if he slept with another citizen's wife? That was theft of lineage. If a husband caught an adulterer in the act, the law allowed him to kill the man on the spot. But if he chose to spare his life, he could inflict a humiliation ritual that is the stuff of nightmares. Historical texts suggest a punishment known as raffinadosis, which involved inserting a large radish or a spiny fish into the adulterer's rear end. While some historians debate if this was just a comic exaggeration by playwrights, the very existence of the term shows that the Greeks viewed humiliation as a fate almost worse than death. Greek religion wasn't always about pouring wine politely for Zeus. The cult of Dionysus, the god of wine and madness, hosted secret rituals that terrified the establishment. These were the bacchanalia. Initiates, often women known as maenads, would retreat into the mountains at night. Fueled by wine and trance-inducing dancing, they would enter a state of ecstasis, literally standing outside oneself. Reports from the time describe these women tearing live animals apart with their bare hands and eating the raw flesh. It was a release valve for a society that kept women so tightly controlled. In the wild darkness, sexual and violent impulses were allowed to run free, blending religious worship with an orgiastic frenzy that defied all social order. Let's go back to Sparta for a moment, because their views on biology were unique. The Spartans were obsessed with eugenics, the idea of breeding the perfect soldier. This obsession trumped the concept of monogamy. It was perfectly legal, and even encouraged, for an older man with a younger wife to lend her to a younger, stronger warrior for the purpose of conception. The idea was that the young warrior's seed was more potent and would produce a better soldier for the state. The husband wouldn't be jealous, he would be proud to raise the child as his own, knowing it strengthened Sparta. In this society, women were essentially viewed as broodmares for the state, and paternity was less important than genetic quality. Finally, we have to look at where the darkest deeds happened. In Athens, the Ceramicus was the potter's quarter, but at night, it transformed into a red light district and a hookup spot for the desperate. Archaeological digs here have found something unsettling: curse tablets. These were strips of lead inscribed with spells and buried with the dead. Many of them were sexual curses. A rejected lover would write the name of their crush and bind them with spells to make them impotent, or to ensure they could never love anyone else. It reveals a side of Greek sexuality that was petty, vindictive, and deeply superstitious. They didn't just want to sleep with you, they wanted to own your soul and body, even if they had to ask the spirits of the underworld to help them do it. The ancient Greeks gave us democracy, philosophy, and geometry, but they also left behind a legacy of sexuality that is complicated, often brutal, and deeply fascinating. It was a world where the lines between mentorship and abuse, marriage and duty, and worship and madness were incredibly blurred. By understanding these darker secrets, we stop seeing them as marble statues and start seeing them as human beings, messy, driven by desire, and terrifyingly different from us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's shadow, hit that like button, it really helps the channel. What surprised you the most? The Spartan wedding ritual or the army of lovers? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a trip into the forbidden past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.